My husband's charity work raised millions, but the money went to a woman who shared his last name. Hi, everyone. Before we get into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel's reach has been dropping a bit, and one of the best ways you can support us is by subscribing. It's quick, free, and helps us keep bringing you new and interesting stories. Your support means the world to us, and together we can grow this channel. Thank you so much. Now let's get to today's story. I'm writing from a temporary account for obvious reasons, and I've changed some details to protect my anonymity. They say the devil wears many faces, but in my experience, he wears one face perfectly, the face of a good man doing good work. My name is Victoria, and for 8 years I was married to a philanthropist, a visionary, a man whose foundation changed thousands of lives. Or so I thought. The truth was so much darker than I could have imagined. And by the time I discovered it, I was already tangled in his web of lies so deeply that escaping seemed impossible. But I did escape. And I made sure he paid for every lie, every stolen dollar, every destroyed life. This is how I brought down the man the world called a hero. I met Jonathan Preston when I was 27 and working as an event coordinator for a nonprofit in Boston. He came to one of our galas as a major donor, and I was assigned to make sure he had everything he needed. He was 42 then, handsome in that distinguished way that comes with age and confidence. Gray at the temples, expensive suit, the kind of presence that made people turn when he entered a room. But what struck me most was how genuinely interested he seemed in our work. He didn't just write a check and leave. He asked questions. He wanted to understand our programs, our challenges, our vision. At the end of the evening, he found me and said, "You're very good at what you do. Have you ever considered working for a larger organization?" "Like what?" I asked. "Like mine." That's how I learned about the Preston Foundation. Jonathan had started it 5 years earlier after, he said, a transformative experience volunteering in Haiti after the earthquake. He'd seen children without homes, families without hope, and decided he needed to do more than just donate money. He needed to build something lasting. The foundation focused on 3 areas: building schools in developing countries, funding medical clinics in underserved areas, and providing disaster relief. It had already raised over $20 million and completed projects in 7 countries. "I need someone who understands how to make donors feel connected to the mission," Jonathan said. "Someone who can tell our story in a way that inspires people to give. I think that person might be you." He offered me twice my current salary and the chance to travel the world doing meaningful work. I said yes before I'd fully processed what I was agreeing to. I started at the Preston Foundation 3 weeks later. The office was in a beautiful building in downtown Boston, all glass and modern furniture and walls covered with photographs of the children and families the foundation had helped. Jonathan was an incredible boss, patient, encouraging, brilliant at articulating the mission. He taught me how to cultivate major donors, how to write grant proposals that moved people to tears, how to turn charitable giving into a movement. We worked closely together for almost a year before our relationship became romantic. It happened gradually, naturally. Late nights working on fundraising campaigns, shared meals discussing strategy, a growing awareness that we understood each other in a way that felt rare and precious. Jonathan was a widower, he'd told me. His wife had died of cancer 6 years earlier, and he'd poured his grief into building something good. The foundation was his way of honoring her memory. I fell in love with his pain, his purpose, his passion, and eventually I fell in love with him. We got married in a small ceremony 2 years after I joined the foundation. Just close friends and family, though family for Jonathan was limited. He said he'd grown apart from most of his relatives after his wife's death. They hadn't understood his need to dedicate himself to philanthropy instead of moving on with a normal life. I didn't think much of it at the time. Grief affects people differently, and Jonathan seemed so committed to his mission that I understood why others might not comprehend it. Our wedding made the society pages. Philanthropist Jonathan Preston marries Foundation Director Victoria Chen. We looked happy in the photos, and we were. I believed completely in what we were building together. The foundation grew rapidly after our marriage. Jonathan's profile rose. He was invited to speak at conferences, interviewed on news programs, featured in magazines as one of the new generation of social entrepreneurs. I stood beside him at galas where we raised millions in a single night. I watched donors cry as Jonathan described children whose lives had been transformed by our schools. I traveled with him to project sites and saw the buildings we'd funded, the medical equipment we'd purchased, the communities we'd helped. It all seemed so real, so tangible, so good. I never questioned any of it. Why would I? I saw the bank statements showing millions flowing in. I attended board meetings where we reviewed project reports. I met beneficiaries who thanked us tearfully for changing their lives. Everything appeared legitimate. Everything appeared to be exactly what Jonathan said it was. The first crack in that illusion appeared on a Tuesday morning in October, 8 years into our marriage. I was in Jonathan's home office looking for a file he'd asked me to bring to the foundation office. He was already at a breakfast meeting with a potential donor, and I had keys to everything, access to everything. We had no secrets, or so I thought. The file he wanted wasn't where he said it would be. So I started opening drawers, looking through folders. That's when I found a document that didn't make sense. It was a bank transfer authorization. $500,000 sent to an account belonging to someone named Lydia Preston. I stared at it, confused. Jonathan had never mentioned anyone named Lydia, and she had his last name, which meant she was either a relative or... I pulled out my phone and called him. "Hey," he answered. "Did you find the file?" "Who's Lydia Preston?" There was a pause. Just a beat too long. "Why do you ask?" "Because I found a transfer authorization for $500,000 to her. Who is she?" "She's my sister." "You have a sister?" "Half-sister. Different mothers. We're not close. She's going through some financial difficulties, and I'm helping her out." "You never mentioned having a sister." "We don't really talk. Haven't for years. But family is family. When she reached out asking for help, I couldn't say no." It was plausible. Jonathan rarely talked about his family. And philanthropists helped people, right? Even difficult relatives. Why such a large amount? "She's in serious trouble. Legal issues, debts. I'm helping her settle everything so she can start fresh." "It's complicated, Victoria. I'll explain it all when I get home." "Okay," I said, though something felt wrong. "Did you find the file?" "Not yet. I'll keep looking." I hung up and sat there, holding that transfer authorization. $500,000 to a woman I'd never heard of, who shared my husband's last name. When Jonathan came home that night, he brought flowers and takeout from my favorite restaurant. He was charming, attentive, exactly the husband I'd come to expect. Over dinner, he explained about Lydia. She was his half-sister from his father's first marriage. She'd made bad choices, gotten involved with the wrong people, accumulated massive debts. She'd come to him desperate, and he'd decided to help her get back on her feet. "Why didn't you tell me about her before?" "I'm embarrassed," he admitted. "My family isn't like yours. They're messy, troubled. I've tried to distance myself from all that. When Lydia showed up needing money, I wanted to just handle it quietly without dragging you into the drama." "I'm your wife. You can tell me about your family." "I know. You're right. I should have been more open." He reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm sorry." I wanted to believe him. I wanted everything to go back to how it had been that morning, before I'd found that document. But something nagged at me. Something didn't feel right. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling. So I did something I'd never done before. I started looking through Jonathan's private files. I found more transfers to Lydia. Not just the $500,000, but a pattern going back years. $50,000 here, $100,000 there, monthly payments of $10,000. Millions of dollars flowing to this woman I'd never met or even heard of until a few days ago. I found other things too. Shell companies with names I didn't recognize. Accounts in the Cayman Islands. Complex financial structures that I couldn't quite follow, but that looked nothing like the straightforward foundation finances I was familiar with. I took photos of everything with my phone. I didn't know what I was going to do with them yet, but I knew I needed evidence of whatever this was. Jonathan noticed my behavior changing. I was quieter, more distant. At night in bed, I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling while he slept peacefully beside me. "Are you okay?" he asked one morning. "You've seemed off lately." "I'm fine. Just stressed about the gala." We had a major fundraising event coming up in 2 weeks. It was going to be our biggest yet, with tickets at $5,000 a plate and auction items valued in the hundreds of thousands. We were hoping to raise $3 million in one night. "Don't worry so much," Jonathan said, kissing my forehead. "You're brilliant at this. The gala will be perfect." I smiled and nodded, but inside I was screaming. I needed to find out who Lydia Preston really was. So I hired a private investigator. His name was Marcus Webb, and he came highly recommended by a friend who'd used him during her divorce. I met him at a coffee shop far from our neighborhood, paid him in cash, and gave him Lydia's name and the address I'd found on one of the transfer documents. "What am I looking for?" Marcus asked. "Everything. Who she is, where she lives, what her relationship is to my husband. I need to know if she's really his sister. And if she's not, then I need to know what she is." Marcus called me 5 days later. "We need to meet, in person. This is bigger than you thought." We met at the same coffee shop. Marcus had a folder that he slid across the table to me. "Lydia Preston isn't your husband's sister," he said. "She's his wife." The world stopped. "That's not possible. I'm his wife." "You're his wife in Massachusetts. She's his wife in Nevada. They got married 12 years ago in Las Vegas. Never divorced." I opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside was a marriage certificate. Jonathan Edward Preston and Lydia Ann Morrison, married June 14th, 12 years ago. 4 years before he'd married me. "This can't be real," I whispered. "It's real." I verified it with the county records. It's a legal marriage, which means your marriage to him is invalid. He's a bigamist. I felt like I might throw up. "There's more," Marcus said. "Lydia lives in a house in Henderson, Nevada. Nice place, 4 bedrooms, pool. It's owned by a shell company that I traced back to the Preston Foundation." "The foundation owns her house?" "Not directly, but the money trail leads there. And Victoria, that's not all." He pulled out more documents. I dug into the foundation's finances. At least 60% of the donations you've been raising are being diverted to personal accounts and shell companies. The schools, the clinics, the disaster relief projects. Some of them are real, but they're vastly overstated. Most of the money is going somewhere else. "Where?" "To Jonathan and Lydia. They've been running this scheme for years. The foundation is essentially a front for money laundering and fraud." I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Everything I'd believed, everything I'd worked for, everything I thought I knew, it was all a lie. "What about the projects I visited?" I asked desperately. "I've seen the schools. I've met the children. Some of them are real, enough to maintain the illusion, but they cost a fraction of what the foundation claims. The rest of the money is being siphoned off. And I'm implicated in this." Marcus nodded grimly. "As his wife or his supposed wife, and as the foundation's director of development, yes. If this comes out, you'll be investigated too." "But I didn't know." "You'll have to prove that. And in the meantime, your reputation will be destroyed." I sat there in that coffee shop, holding proof that my entire life was a lie. My husband was a fraud. My marriage was invalid. My career had been built on scamming generous people who wanted to help the world. And if the truth came out, I'd go down with him. I went home in a daze. Jonathan wasn't there. He was at the foundation office, probably charming another millionaire into donating to our fake charity. I locked myself in the bedroom and called the one person I thought might understand. My best friend Sarah was a lawyer, though not the kind I needed right now. She did family law, not white-collar crime. But she was smart and she loved me, and I needed someone I could trust. "I need help," I said when she answered. "Something's happened." I told her everything. The transfers to Lydia, the private investigator, the marriage certificate, the fraud. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Victoria, you need to get a lawyer. A criminal defense lawyer, right now." "I didn't do anything wrong." "It doesn't matter. You're the director of development for a fraudulent charity. You've been signing documents, soliciting donations, representing the foundation publicly. Even if you didn't know about the fraud, you could still be charged as an accomplice." "That's not fair." "Fair doesn't matter. What matters is protecting yourself. You need to get ahead of this before it explodes." "How?" "You need to decide if you're going to expose him or if you're going to try to extract yourself quietly. Either way, you need legal representation." "What would you do?" "I'd burn him to the ground," Sarah said without hesitation. "He lied to you, used you, committed crimes in your name. He deserves to face consequences, but that's a decision only you can make." That night, I pretended everything was normal. I made dinner. I smiled when Jonathan came home. I listened to him talk about the potential donor he'd met with, about how excited he was for the upcoming gala. "This is going to be our biggest success yet," he said. "I can feel it." I looked at the man I'd loved for 8 years and saw a stranger, a con artist, a criminal who'd built his entire empire on lies and theft. "I hope so," I said. Over the next week, I worked in secret. I hired the criminal defense lawyer Sarah recommended, a woman named Patricia Chen who specialized in white-collar crime. I gave her everything Marcus had found, plus everything I'd documented from Jonathan's files. Patricia was blunt. "You're in a bad position. But if you cooperate with federal investigators and can prove you didn't know about the fraud, you might avoid charges." Might? There are no guarantees. But the alternative is waiting for this to blow up and being dragged down with him. If you come forward first, if you bring evidence and demonstrate you're a victim of his scheme too, you have a much better chance. What about the foundation? All the people who work there? Most of them are probably innocent like you. But the foundation will be shut down. The money will be seized. Everyone will be investigated. And Jonathan? He'll go to prison. Probably for a long time. I thought about the man who'd brought me flowers, who'd held my hand at our wedding, who'd spoken so passionately about changing the world. That man had never existed. What do I need to do? Patricia laid out a plan. First, I needed to gather more evidence. Every document, every email, every financial record I could access. Second, I needed to approach the FBI with everything I had. Third, I needed to prepare for my life to fall apart. "This won't be easy," Patricia warned. "When this comes out, you'll be destroyed in the press. People will call you complicit, stupid, a gold digger. Your name will be associated with this fraud forever." "I know." "Are you sure you want to do this? Because once we start, there's no going back." I thought about all the donors who'd trusted us, about the people who'd given their money believing they were helping children and families in need, about the real schools and clinics that could have been built with the millions Jonathan had stolen. "I'm sure," I said. But before I went to the FBI, I needed to do one more thing. I needed to meet Lydia. I flew to Las Vegas without telling Jonathan. Told him I was going to visit Sarah for the weekend. He barely looked up from his laptop when I said goodbye. Marcus had given me Lydia's address in Henderson. I rented a car and drove there on Saturday morning, my heart pounding the entire way. The house was exactly as Marcus had described. Beautiful, expensive, with a perfectly manicured lawn and a Mercedes in the driveway. The house of someone who'd benefited greatly from stolen charity money. I sat in my rental car for 20 minutes, gathering courage. Then I walked up to the door and knocked. The woman who answered was about my age, blonde, attractive. She wore yoga pants and a tank top, and her expression was friendly until she really looked at me. "Can I help you?" "Are you Lydia Preston?" "Yes. Who are you?" "My name is Victoria Preston. I'm married to Jonathan." Her face went white. That's not possible. Can I come in? We need to talk. She stood there for a moment, clearly debating whether to slam the door in my face. Then she stepped aside and let me in. The inside of the house was as beautiful as the outside. Expensive furniture, tasteful art, huge windows overlooking the pool. The house of a woman who lived very comfortably on stolen money. Jonathan told me he was divorced, Lydia said, and her voice was shaking. He said you were his ex-wife, that you had an amicable split years ago. We're not divorced. We're married. Or we think we are. But apparently that marriage is invalid because he's still married to you. Lydia sank onto her couch. Oh my God. How long have you known him? 13 years. We got married 12 years ago. After his first wife died, he was devastated. The foundation was his way of honoring her memory and finding purpose again. His first wife? Caroline. She died of cancer. It destroyed him. I shook my head. He told me the same story, that he'd been married before and she died of cancer, and he started the foundation to honor her. That's the truth. I met him at a charity event a year after she died. We fell in love. We got married in Vegas because he didn't want a big wedding so soon after losing Caroline. Lydia, when did you last see Jonathan? 3 weeks ago. He comes to visit every few months. He's busy with the foundation, traveling for projects. But we talk every day. He sends me money to take care of the house and... She stopped. How long have you been married to him? 8 years. She covered her mouth with her hand. He's been married to both of us for 8 years? It looks that way. We sat there in silence, two women trying to process the fact that we'd both been married to the same man, that neither of us had been his wife, that both of us had been played. Why are you here? Lydia finally asked. So I told her. About the transfers, about the private investigator, about the fraud and the money laundering and the fake charity projects. Lydia's face went from shock to horror to rage. That son of a bitch, she breathed. I thought we were helping people. He'd tell me about the schools, the children, how many lives we were changing. I thought I was part of something good. Did you ever question where the money was coming from? No. I mean, I knew he ran a charity. I knew donations were coming in. He said the foundation was doing well, that we were growing every year. He set up accounts for me, gave me cards to use, said it was my share of our income. I thought it was legitimate. It wasn't. Most of the foundation's money is being stolen. The projects are mostly fake. We've been raising millions and keeping it. We? Lydia stood up. I haven't been keeping anything. I didn't know about any of this. Neither did I. But legally, we're both implicated. I'm the foundation's director of development. You're receiving massive amounts of money from the fraud. When this comes out, we'll both be investigated. Lydia paced across the room. What are you going to do? I'm going to the FBI. I'm going to tell them everything and give them all the evidence I have. I'm going to cooperate fully in exchange for immunity or at least leniency. And you want me to do the same. I want you to protect yourself. Jonathan has been using both of us. He set us up to take the fall if this ever came out. Right now, you look like his accomplice. A woman living in a house bought with charity fraud, receiving millions in transfers. Unless you cooperate and prove you didn't know, you're going to prison. Lydia sat back down. I can't believe this. I've been with him for 13 years. I thought he loved me. He doesn't love either of us. He loves money and the image of being a philanthropist. We were just convenient covers for his scheme. What do you need from me? Everything you know. Emails, texts, financial records, anything that shows the pattern of money coming to you and shows you didn't know it was stolen. I have a lawyer. She can represent both of us if you want, or you can get your own. But we need to go to the authorities together. Two women who were both deceived by the same con man. That's our best chance. Lydia was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'll do it. But I want to be there when they arrest him. So do I said. Patricia Chen agreed to represent both of us. She reviewed all the evidence we'd gathered, everything from my documentation of the foundation's finances to Lydia's records of the transfers she'd received to Marcus's investigative report. "This is solid," Patricia said. "Between the two of you, we can build a strong case that you were both victims of his fraud. But you need to be prepared for this to be ugly." "How ugly?" Lydia asked. "National news ugly. The man behind a major charity arrested for fraud and bigamy. His 2 wives coming forward to expose him. This will be everywhere." "Good," I said. "He deserves to have everyone know what he really is." We met with the FBI on a Wednesday afternoon. Special Agent Karen Morrison listened to our story, reviewed our evidence, and asked questions for 4 hours. At the end, she leaned back in her chair and said, "This is one of the most elaborate charity frauds I've seen. Mr. Preston has been running this scheme for over a decade. Based on what you've given us, we estimate he's stolen approximately $35 million in donations." $35 million? I repeated, stunned. "That's our preliminary estimate. The actual number could be higher. We'll need to conduct a full audit." "What happens now?" Lydia asked. "We investigate. We gather additional evidence. We build a case. And when we're ready, we arrest him." "How long will that take?" "A few weeks, maybe a month. We need to be thorough. But ladies, I want to be clear. You're both still under investigation, too. We believe your story that you were deceived, but we need to verify that. Don't leave the country. Don't destroy any evidence. And don't contact Mr. Preston about any of this." The waiting was torture. I had to go home every night and pretend everything was normal. Had to smile at Jonathan over dinner. Had to help finalize plans for the gala that would now never happen. The gala was scheduled for a Saturday night in early November. 2 weeks before that, Agent Morrison called. "We're moving this weekend," she said. "We'll arrest him Sunday morning at your home. We wanted to give you a heads up so you can be somewhere else when it happens." "I want to be there," I said. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." Sunday morning, I woke up early. Jonathan was still asleep beside me. I looked at him in the dim light and felt nothing but contempt. I got up quietly, got dressed, and went downstairs. Made coffee. Sat at the kitchen table and waited. The FBI arrived at 7 a.m. I let them in. "He's upstairs," I said. 4 agents went up. I heard Jonathan's confused voice, heard him asking what was happening, heard the agent reading him his rights. They brought him downstairs in handcuffs. His eyes found mine. "Victoria, what's going on?" I looked at my husband, my fake husband, my con artist, my liar. And I smiled. "It's over, Jonathan. They know everything. About the fraud, about the money laundering, about Lydia. All of it." His face went from confusion to comprehension to rage in seconds. "You did this." "I did this. You stole from people who trusted you. You built your entire life on lies. You used me and Lydia and everyone who believed in you. And now you're going to pay for it. You'll go down too," he spat. "You're implicated in all of this." "No, I'm not. I cooperated with federal investigators. I brought them evidence. I'm a witness, not a suspect." Agent Morrison stepped between us. "Mr. Preston, let's go." They let him out of the house. I watched through the window as they put him in an FBI vehicle and drove away. Then I sat down on my couch and cried. Not for Jonathan, but for the life I'd thought I had. The marriage I'd believed in. The mission I'd thought was real. All of it was gone. And I'd been the one to destroy it. The story broke that afternoon. Prominent philanthropist arrested for charity fraud. By evening, it was national news. The headlines were brutal. Preston Foundation accused of stealing millions. Charity executive lived double life with 2 wives. Major donors deceived by fraudulent foundation. My phone exploded with calls from friends, reporters, former donors. I ignored all of them. The foundation was immediately shut down. All accounts were frozen. Every employee was interviewed by the FBI. Some of them believed I'd been complicit. Some of them were angry at me for destroying the organization. None of them understood that the organization had never really existed. Patricia had been right about the press. I was vilified almost as much as Jonathan. People called me stupid for not seeing the fraud. They called me complicit for working so closely with him. They called me a gold digger who'd known exactly what she was doing. I stopped reading the articles, stopped watching the news. I focused on cooperating with the investigation and rebuilding my life. Lydia and I stayed in touch. We'd been through something together that no one else could understand. The shared experience of being married to the same con man, of building our lives on the same lies. We weren't friends exactly, but we were allies, and that counted for something. The trial happened 9 months later. Jonathan pleaded not guilty, which meant Lydia and I both had to testify. I sat in that courtroom and told the truth about everything. About how I'd discovered the transfers to Lydia, about hiring the private investigator, about finding the evidence of fraud, about going to the FBI. Jonathan's lawyer tried to paint me as a vindictive ex-wife who'd fabricated evidence. But the financial records didn't lie. The shell companies were real. The diverted donations were real. The fake projects were real. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they came back, the verdict was guilty on all counts. Jonathan was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison and ordered to pay restitution of $38 million, the final calculated amount of his fraud. Lydia and I were both cleared of any criminal wrongdoing. The FBI determined we'd both been deceived and had cooperated fully with the investigation. But our reputations were still destroyed. Lydia moved away from Las Vegas, changed her name, started over somewhere new. Last I heard, she was working as a teacher and trying to build a quiet life away from the scandal. I stayed in Boston, partly because I refused to run and partly because I had work to do. With Patricia's help, I approached the remaining legitimate donors to the Preston Foundation. I explained what had happened, showed them the evidence of fraud, and apologized for my role in deceiving them, even though I hadn't known. Some of them were angry and refused to speak to me, but others were understanding. They recognized that I'd been a victim too, that I'd done the right thing by exposing Jonathan rather than protecting him. Together with a small group of those donors, I started a new organization. Not a foundation this time, but a watchdog group that investigates charity fraud and helps donors vet organizations before giving. We call it transparent giving. Our mission is to prevent what happened with the Preston Foundation from happening to anyone else. It's small, and it's hard, and it doesn't erase the damage Jonathan did. But it's real. It's honest. It's built on actual transparency and accountability. And every time we expose a fraudulent charity or help donors make informed decisions, I feel like I'm undoing a tiny piece of the harm I unknowingly helped cause. It's been 3 years now since Jonathan's arrest. I've rebuilt my life. Not into anything glamorous or high profile, but into something stable and real. I date occasionally, though I'm careful. Slow to trust. Hyper-aware of red flags I missed before. I go to therapy every week. I'm learning to forgive myself for not seeing what Jonathan really was. Learning to understand that con artists are skilled at deception, and it wasn't my fault that I believed him. Some days I believe that. Some days I don't. But I keep moving forward. Jonathan is in a federal prison in Pennsylvania. I've never visited him, and I never will. Lydia went once, she told me. She needed to look him in the eye and ask why he'd done this to her. He told her he'd loved her once, but love had stopped being enough. Money, power, admiration. Those were more intoxicating than any relationship. He said it without apology, as if it was just a fact, as if the lives he'd destroyed were just collateral damage in his pursuit of something greater. Lydia said she left that prison visit feeling nothing. Not anger, not sadness. Just the recognition that the man she'd loved had never really existed. I understand that feeling. Sometimes people ask me if I regret exposing Jonathan. If maybe I could have just divorced him quietly and walked away from the whole mess. I tell them no. Because as much as it hurt to tear apart my own life, it was the right thing to do. The donors deserved to know their money was being stolen. The people who believed in the foundation's mission deserved the truth. and Jonathan deserved to face consequences for what he'd done. Did I wish I'd never met him? Sometimes. Did I wish I'd seen through his lies earlier? Always. But I couldn't change the past. I could only control what I did once I knew the truth. And I chose to burn it all down rather than let him keep stealing and lying and destroying. My husband's charity work raised millions. But the money went to fund his lies, his affairs, his double life. And when I discovered it, I made sure the world knew exactly what kind of man he really was. That's my story. Not the story of a stupid woman who was fooled, but the story of a woman who was deceived, who discovered the truth, and who had the courage to act on it even when it cost her everything. I lost my marriage, my career, my reputation. But I kept something more important. I kept my integrity. And in the end, that was worth more than anything Jonathan ever gave me.